Let me begin by introducing myself properly. My name is Marcus Washington, and I'm 65 years old. I run a freight hauling business out of Detroit, Michigan. What I'm about to share with you is the most devastating story I've ever lived through. It's about trust, deception, and how the most overlooked person in my household turned out to be the only one with enough integrity to tell me the truth. If you've ever trusted someone completely, if you've ever believed you truly knew another person's soul, this story is going to shake you to your core. You might realize that sometimes the person standing right beside you is the one causing the most destruction behind your back. Before I dive in, let me ask you something. If you've ever experienced the sting of a massive betrayal, or a lie that turned your entire world inside out, hit that like button on this video. Let this old man know he's not the only one who's felt this kind of pain. Go ahead and subscribe to the OG Chronicles channel right now, because I've got more real-life stories that will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Have you ever been stabbed in the back by someone you thought you knew? I love connecting with folks from every corner of this country and around the globe. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to my story. I was born right here in Detroit. It was a hard-working city, a place where people knew what it meant to hustle and survive. My old man was a long-haul trucker. He lived on those interstate highways, barely home more than a few days a month. I grew up watching him pull out of the driveway before sunrise with a loaded rig, only to roll back in weeks later, bone-tired, but wearing a proud smile because he'd brought home the money to keep us fed and clothed. My mother held down the fort, mostly on her own. She was a powerhouse, the kind of woman who never complained, even when life got rough. She'd be over a hot stove, cooking collard greens and cornbread, singing gospel songs while she worked. From my father, I learned the value of hard work. From my mother, I learned that family was supposed to be sacred. At least, that's what I used to believe. I grew up helping my father whenever I could. When I was 12 years old, I was riding shotgun on short hauls, learning how to handle a rig, how to secure freight properly, and how to negotiate with brokers. My father used to tell me, "Son, a real man is only as good as his word. If you make a promise, you honor it. If you get married, it's for life. If you have a family, you protect it no matter what." I held those words like they were gospel truth. I assumed everyone lived by the same code. When my father passed away, I was barely 21 years old. I was left with his beat-up old truck and a pile of debt that would have crushed most people. But I didn't quit. I took that rig, fixed it up the best I could, and hit the road. I traveled everywhere: Chicago, Atlanta, Memphis, Baltimore, Charlotte. I spent 15, sometimes 20 days on the road at a stretch, sleeping in the cab, eating cold sandwiches, and showering at truck stops that smelled like diesel and desperation. But the money started flowing in. I paid off my father's debts, bought another truck, then another. I grew the business slowly, with sweat, honesty, and determination. It was around that time I met Dominique. She came from what folks considered a respectable family here in Detroit, people with property and a solid reputation in the community. I was just a trucker trying to make something of myself. But she was beautiful, refined, and always at church. She was there every Sunday morning and at every Wednesday night prayer service, always with her Bible in hand. A good girl from a good family. Or so everyone said. I thought to myself, this is the right woman for me, a God-fearing woman who'll take care of the home while I'm out working. I married her thinking I'd found a treasure. I had no idea I was walking straight into a lie that would define the next 40 years of my life. Our life started out simple enough. I was on the road constantly, and she was keeping the house. Before long, the kids came along. First Jamal, then Keisha. I was overjoyed. I'd come back from those long hauls exhausted and covered in road grime, but I was genuinely happy. Dominique always welcomed me home with a smile. There was always a hot meal on the table. The house was spotless, and the kids were clean and well fed. She kept going to church every single day. "It's my peace," she'd say. "I need to pray for our marriage and for God to protect you on those highways." I thought it was beautiful. I felt incredibly fortunate to have a woman so dedicated to God and family. The business kept expanding. I went from 2 trucks to 5, then 10. Today, I operate a fleet of 40 rigs, run a full office, and manage a team of employees. But the price of that success was living on the road. Being gone for 20 days at a time became my normal routine. Dominique stayed home with the kids, often with help from Pastor Jerome Mitchell, the head of our church. He'd been a close friend of her family for years. He'd baptized our children. He was a man respected by everyone in Detroit's black community. "Don't you worry, Marcus," Dominique would tell me. "Pastor Mitchell looks after us while you're away. He's a man of God. I thank the Lord for having such a dedicated pastor watching over my family." I hired Dadria Thompson. Everyone calls her Dee when the kids were still small. She came to my door needing work, a widow with her own children to support. She was a humble woman, but honest to the bone. She started as our housekeeper, cleaning the place, doing laundry, and cooking meals. Over time, she became part of the family. She worked for us for 25 years. 25 years of seeing everything, hearing everything, and keeping her mouth shut. Because what she saw, Lord, have mercy, what she witnessed would destroy any family, but I knew nothing. I traveled with a light heart, worked hard, and came home thinking I had the perfect life. The devoted wife, the obedient kids, the orderly home. It was all a lie. A massive, calculated deception. And the only person who knew the truth was the most humble person in the house, the one nobody paid much attention to as she scrubbed floors and washed dishes in silence. She knew, and she carried that secret for 20 years until her conscience wouldn't let her breathe anymore. One Monday morning, when I happened to be home without a haul scheduled, Dee came to talk to me, shaking and pale as a ghost, looking ready to pass out. "Mr. Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've been carrying a secret for 20 years. I can't do it anymore. I have to tell you." I looked at her, confused. 20 years? What kind of secret could that be? "Go ahead, Dee," I said. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and the words that came out of her mouth changed my life forever. "When you're out on the road, your wife doesn't sleep alone. And I know exactly who the man is." Those words rang in my head like a church bell that wouldn't stop tolling. I froze. I felt my legs go weak. "What are you talking about, Dee?" I managed to ask Dot. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Let me start from the beginning. Mr. Marcus, you need to understand it all." And that's how she started talking, while I felt my entire world crumble into dust. But before I get to that terrible day, I need to go back in time. I need to tell you how I built this life, this marriage, and all this trust that ended up being thrown in the garbage. Because the story doesn't start with Dee's confession. It starts way back in my childhood here in Detroit, when I was just a boy in short pants running barefoot through the neighborhood. My father, like I said, was a rough man. He didn't talk much, but he had a good heart. He'd leave before sunrise and stay gone for weeks at a time. I remember the smell of diesel fuel on his clothes and the deep rumble of that old truck engine in the driveway. My mother always told me, "Your father is a good man. He works honest. He comes home and he takes care of us. That's what matters." I grew up believing that. I thought every man was like that, and every woman was as faithful as my mother. We were 4 siblings, and I was the oldest. We lived in a modest house with 3 bedrooms and a furnace that barely worked in the winter. My mother would get up before dawn to make strong coffee, as strong as her spirit. We'd have biscuits with butter from the corner store and grits. A real working-class breakfast that filled your belly and your soul. While we ate, my mother was already at the stove preparing lunch. Rice, beans, fried okra, and fatback. Simple food, but there was plenty of it. I grew up watching my father work himself to the bone and my mother handle everything alone. She never complained. I never heard her say a negative word about my father, even though he was absent so much of the time. "He's out there working for us," she'd say. "A man who works that hard deserves respect." I learned that work was sacred, that a real man provides for his family, and that trust forms the foundation of everything. When I was 12, I started going on short hauls with my father. Detroit to Indianapolis, Detroit to Columbus. He taught me everything I needed to know. How to tie down a load properly, how to check tire pressure, how to calculate fuel efficiency. "Pay attention, son," he'd say. "One day this will all be yours." Trucking isn't just about driving. It's about taking care of business and respecting people. Just like a marriage. You take care of it, you respect it, and it'll last a lifetime. I kept those words close to my heart, like they were verses from Scripture. On those trips, we'd stop at roadside diners and eat soul food-smothered chicken, red rice, fresh corn on the cob. My father would talk with other truckers, swapping stories about the road and the freight business. I'd stay quiet, just listening and learning. I learned that in the world of trucking, a man's word is worth more than any contract. If you say you're going to pick up a load, you pick it up. If you say you'll deliver on time, you deliver. Honor meant everything. We'd drive back home, and my mother was always there waiting. The house was clean, the food was ready, and she had a smile on her face. I never saw my mother look upset at my father. I never witnessed them fight. I never saw doubt in their relationship. I thought every marriage was like that when you marry a decent woman, you can travel with peace of mind, knowing she'll be there waiting, faithful and tending to the home. Lord, I was naive that my father died when I was still young. A massive heart attack in the middle of a haul. They found him in the cab of his truck, his hand still gripping the steering wheel. He died doing what he loved. The pain was unbearable, but the responsibility was even heavier. I was left with that old beat-up rig and all the debt my father had accumulated. It was either me stepping up or watching my family go hungry. She came to my door needing work, a widow with her own children to support. "Marcus," he told me, "this truck is on its last legs, but I'm going to fix it up for you. Your father was a good man, and so are you. Pay me when you can." He fixed it practically for free, charging only for parts. Good people still existed. I learned that too. That's when I started driving solo. I was terrified, I won't lie. I was young, and the road was dangerous. But it was either that or let my mother and siblings suffer. I took small loads at first, hauling auto parts from Detroit to Flint, hauling produce to Grand Rapids. Freight nobody else wanted, jobs that didn't pay much. But they taught me the business dot. It went on like that for years. Traveling, coming back, taking any job that came my way. I slept in the cab, ate cold food, and showered in freezing water at truck stops. But the money started accumulating. Little by little, it came in. I paid off my father's debts, helped my mother, bought clothes for my siblings, and had a little left over for myself. I bought another truck, old but functional. I hired a driver, a man named Terrell who'd worked with my father, a man of his word. Now I had 2 rigs on the road. Then I bought a third, then a fourth. The logistics company grew steadily. My father's name which was respected on the road, opened doors for me. "Your big Washington, son?" brokers would ask. "Then the load is yours." Your father never let me down. I honored my father's name and legacy. I never missed a delivery, never lost a load, and never cheated a customer. It was during that time, when life was finally looking up, that I met Dominique. She appeared in my life like what I thought was a gift from God. Now, I know it was the beginning of my ruin. I met her at a church social here in Detroit. I'd gone because a client of mine who was a deacon personally invited me. I wasn't much for social gatherings. I spent all week on the road and just wanted to rest on my days off. But the client was a good man, so I went. There was sweet tea, a cookout, gospel music playing, and that good community vibe. She was there serving peach cobbler at one of the booths, wearing a beautiful dress, her hair done up perfectly, a warm smile on her face. She was polite and gracious to everyone. I bought a piece of cobbler just to have an excuse to talk to her. "Is it good?" she asked with a smile. "It's delicious," I replied, "but not nearly as sweet as the lady who made it." She laughed, blushed, and looked down that shyness you'd expect from a good family girl. We started talking. I asked her name, where she lived, what she did. She told me her family had property on the west side of Detroit, that she helped her mother at home, and that she was very active in the church. "I'm here every time the doors are open," she said proudly. "And I help Pastor Mitchell with church activities. He always needs assistance." Pastor Mitchell. That name would become the curse of my existence. But that day, when she mentioned it, I felt nothing. He was just a preacher, a common figure in her life. I asked her to go out with me that same evening. She said she needed her father's permission. I went to her house the next day. It was a large brick home with a nice porch and well-maintained landscaping. Her father met me in the living room. He was a serious man with graying hair and a suspicious look in his eyes. "You're Big Washington's boy, the trucker?" He asked. "Yes, sir." "Your father was a hard-working man. Died too young. God rest his soul. And what are you doing with your life?" "I'm running the logistics company he started, sir. I've got 4 trucks now, planning on expanding." He looked me over carefully, sizing me up. You could tell I wasn't exactly the kind of son-in-law he'd envisioned. Their family had standing, property, and respect in the community. I was just a trucker, even if I did own the trucks. But Dominique insisted. "Daddy, he's a hard worker. He's honest. He's a good man." After considerable thought, he agreed. "You can court her, but no inappropriate behavior. My daughter is a decent Christian woman. If it's meant to be, you'll marry in the church with God's blessing." Our courtship moved quickly. She was affectionate, attentive, and treated me well. She'd bake for me, iron my clothes, the things women did back then to show they cared. She talked about marriage, about children, about building a family together. "I want to be a dedicated wife," she'd say. "I'll take care of the house, the kids, and you. While you're out working, I'll handle everything here." It seemed too perfect to be true. And it was. But I didn't suspect a thing. She went to church constantly, sometimes twice a day. "I'm going to help Pastor Mitchell," she'd say. "He's organizing the fall revival and needs volunteers." I thought all that dedication was admirable. I thought I was incredibly fortunate to be with a woman so devoted to her faith. My mother loved her. "This girl is a blessing, son. Marry her quickly. Don't let her slip away." We got married in the church with a full ceremony, Pastor Mitchell officiating. The church was packed. Her family on one side, mine on the other. Dominique was stunning in a white dress with a long veil and a bouquet of flowers. Pastor Mitchell gave a powerful sermon. He talked about fidelity, respect, and the sanctity of marriage. "What God has joined together, Let no one separate, he said, looking directly at us. Be faithful to one another in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until death parts you. I said, I do, with my heart full of hope and expectation. She said, I do as well, but her vow was a lie. And Pastor Mitchell knew it. There was no honeymoon. I had a load scheduled and couldn't afford to lose the contract. When the business grows, we'll travel, I promised her. For now, I have to work. She understood, or pretended to. We moved into a rental house in a working-class neighborhood in Detroit. A simple place, 2 bedrooms, a living room, a small kitchen. But it was ours. The early days seemed good. I worked hard, traveled extensively, but when I came home, she was always there. The house was clean. The food was ready. She'd complain a little about me being gone so much, but nothing serious. I know you have to work, she'd say, but I miss you. I get lonely here. Go visit your mother, go to church, talk with your friends, I'd suggest. Yes, I will, she'd reply with a smile that I now know was completely fake. Soon she became pregnant with Jamal. I was overjoyed. I was going to be a father. I was going to have a son to raise, to teach everything my father had taught me. I took care of her throughout the entire pregnancy. When I was home, I did everything. I helped her move around, rubbed her swollen feet, got her whatever she craved. When I traveled, I left extra money and asked my mother to check on her regularly. But Dominique was never truly alone. Pastor Mitchell was always around. He comes by to keep me company, she'd tell me. He brings devotional books. We pray together. I thanked God for such a dedicated pastor. I thought he was a saint, looking after my pregnant wife while I worked. It never crossed my mind that he was taking advantage of my absence, that every time I hit the road, he was in my house, sleeping in my bed, and being intimate with my wife. Jamal was born, and it was a celebration. A beautiful, healthy baby boy with bright eyes. Pastor Mitchell baptized him. It was a lovely ceremony. This boy will be a man of God, he said, placing his hand on the baby's head. He will honor his father and mother. Honor his father? What a cruel joke. He was baptizing his own son, and I didn't know it. A few years later, Keisha came along. A beautiful girl with bright eyes and thick, curly hair. Another joy in my life, and another lie right to my face. Pastor Mitchell baptized her too. Your family is truly blessed, Marcus, he told me after the ceremony, shaking my hand firmly. 2 beautiful children, a devoted wife, a growing business. The Lord favors you. I believed him. I believed every single word from that man in the pulpit. Meanwhile, he was laughing at me on the inside. Our routine was always the same. I traveled, staying gone for 15 or 20 days at a stretch. I'd call from payphones along the highway to check in. Everything's fine here, Dominique would always say. The kids are doing great. I'm doing fine. Pastor Mitchell stopped by today, brought us a blessing. And I, like a complete fool, thanked God for that man. When I came home, I always brought gifts. A doll for Keisha, a toy truck for Jamal, a new dress for Dominique. I'd arrive home exhausted and filthy from the road, but I was genuinely happy. I'd hug the kids, kiss my wife, and thank God for the family I had. A family that wasn't mine. Children who weren't mine. A wife who was never truly mine. But back then, I knew nothing, and there was one person who did know everything. She'd come into our home when the kids were small, desperately needing work, a widow with her own children to feed. She started working for us, cleaning, cooking, and managing the household. And over time, she saw it all. She witnessed everything that went on in that house while I was hundreds of miles away, sweating to provide for a family that was betraying me. Arrived in our lives when the business was really taking off. I just purchased several more rigs. The company was becoming well known throughout the Midwest region. Contracts were flowing in steadily. Dominique told me she couldn't handle the house alone anymore. Since you travel so much, and with the kids being small and the house being bigger now, I can't do it all by myself, she complained. I agreed immediately. I wanted my wife to rest, to have time for the kids and for the church she claimed to love so much. Dee was recommended by a neighbor who knew her situation. She was a simple, humble woman who'd lost her husband a few years earlier. I can do it all, Mrs. Washington, she said during the interview. Washing, ironing, cooking, cleaning. I really need this job. I have my own kids to support. Dominique looked at me, and I nodded my approval. You can start Monday, my wife said, and that's how Dee entered our lives. She came to work, but she ended up becoming the silent witness to the greatest crime ever committed against me. She saw everything from the moment she figured it out, and she stayed quiet not because she was complicit, but because she was poor, because she desperately needed the job, and because she knew nobody would take the word of a housekeeper over the word of a prominent lady and a respected pastor. In the beginning, Dee was just another presence in the house. She'd arrive early, around 7 in the morning, make the coffee, straighten up the beds, and wash the dishes from the night before. She was discreet and quiet, moving through the house like a shadow. The kids absolutely loved her. She was patient and kind, playing with them while she worked. Miss Dee, tell us a story. Jamal would ask Dot, and she'd tell simple stories about her childhood down south, about growing up on a farm, about simpler times. Dominique treated her cordially enough, but always with that clear distance between employer and employee. Dee, heat up the food. Dee, wash these clothes. Dee, clean that room. Orders here, orders there. Dee obeyed everything with a soft, "Yes, ma'am." She never complained. She needed that job too desperately to risk it. I treated her with respect. My mother had always taught me that all honest work is dignified. When I was home, I'd talk with her like a human being. How are your kids doing, Dee? They're doing fine, Mr. Marcus. Thank the Lord. You need anything? Just say the word. She'd thank me, always shy, always grateful. She never asked for anything beyond her wages, which I always paid fairly and on time. The business kept growing steadily. I went from 10 trucks to 20 within a few years. I built an actual office space and hired a secretary and an accountant to handle the administrative work. Our home situation improved significantly as well. We stopped renting. I purchased a large house with a yard, a 2-car garage, and enough space for the kids to grow up comfortably. Dominique was absolutely thrilled. Now we have a real home, she said with genuine excitement. I furnished it completely. I bought a new refrigerator, a new stove, and a big color television. I wanted my family to have comfort and security. But the price for all of this was me living on the highway more than ever. As the company expanded, I traveled farther and longer. Not just Michigan, but down to Tennessee, over to Pennsylvania, down to Georgia, up to New York. Long trips that lasted weeks at a time. I called every single day from payphones along the interstate highways. Hey, baby, is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine. The kids are great. I'm doing well, too. When are you coming back? In a few days. I love you. I love you, too. Lies, she never loved me. But I didn't know that then. The routine when I traveled was always the same, or so I believed. Dominique would get up, take the kids to school, come back home, and stay there until it was time to pick them up in the afternoon. In the evenings, there was always something at the church. Prayer group meeting, she'd say when I called. Choir practice. Organizing some event. Always the church. Always Pastor Mitchell needing help with something. D saw the real routine, the truth behind the facade. She saw Dominique getting dressed up more elaborately than usual on the days I was away. She saw her putting on expensive perfume, doing her hair carefully, wearing her best clothes. "I'm going to the church," she'd tell Dee casually. "I'll be back later. If the kids need anything, you're here." And she'd leave. Sometimes she wouldn't come back until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. She'd walk into the house like nothing unusual had happened, go straight to bed, and wake up normally the next day, as if she'd been there all night. Other times, she didn't even leave the house. A car would show up, always the same car. Dee saw it from the window of her small room in the back of the house. A discreet black sedan would park in the garage, hidden from the street. A man would walk in through the kitchen door, the one that faced the backyard, where neighbors couldn't easily see. He'd stay until the middle of the night. He'd leave before the sun came up, before anyone in the neighborhood would be awake to notice. Every single time I traveled, it was the same pattern. Sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on how long I was gone. Dee never saw the man's face clearly at first. He arrived after dark and left before dawn, always careful, always cautious. But she knew someone was there. She heard the sounds, the low conversations, Dominique's laughter echoing softly through the house. A laugh Dee never heard when I was home. A different kind of laugh, more free, more joyful. The laugh of a woman in love. Only it wasn't love for me. For months, Dee carried that knowledge alone, the weight of it crushing her spirit. She cleaned the house knowing that in the bed she was making, my wife and another man had slept together. She washed the sheets, knowing exactly what had happened there. She ironed Dominique's clothes, knowing she wore them to meet her lover, and she stayed silent. "It's not my business," she told herself repeatedly. "I need this job. I have my own children to feed and clothe." One morning, she almost got caught in the middle of it all. It was very early, just after dawn. She'd just arrived for work, walking in through the kitchen door like she always did. She almost collided with a man who was leaving. He turned his face away quickly, but she saw enough. He wasn't just any man. He was a well-known figure in the community, very well known, but she didn't want to believe what she'd seen. I must have seen wrong, she thought, trying to convince herself. It can't be him. No way, but it was him. She confirmed it over time. The car, the voice that would occasionally drift out when they thought no one was listening, the way he walked, his build and height. There was absolutely no doubt. The man sleeping with Dominique, the man betraying me, the man using my house like it was a cheap motel, was Pastor Jerome Mitchell. The man I respected deeply, the man who'd baptized my children, the man who'd performed my wedding ceremony. That man. Dee felt physically sick when she realized the full truth. She felt angry, confused, betrayed on my behalf. She desperately wanted to tell me. But how? And when? I was always on the road. There were no cell phones back then, only payphones at truck stops. Was she supposed to call the office and leave a message? "Mr. Marcus, your wife is cheating on you with the pastor." Nobody would believe her. They'd say she was crazy, that she was making up malicious lies to cause trouble, and she'd lose her job immediately. Worse than that, she'd lose her reputation in the community. She'd be marked, labeled. That's Dee, the one who told vicious lies about the lady and the pastor. She wouldn't find work anywhere else in Detroit. So she stayed quiet, swallowing the truth like poison. But the guilt was eating her alive from the inside. Every single time I came home happy, hugging the kids enthusiastically, kissing Dominique, thanking God for my blessed family, Dee felt her heart tighten painfully in her chest. Poor Mr. Marcus, she thought constantly, working like a dog, thinking he has a real family. If he only knew the truth. But she didn't speak. She couldn't bring herself to destroy what I believed was my life. Years passed this way. Jamal and Keisha grew up. I worked harder than ever, traveled constantly, built a successful legacy. Dominique betrayed me, lied to me with practiced ease, and lived a complete double life. Pastor Mitchell preached his powerful sermons every Sunday, gave blessings at weddings and funerals, and slept with a married woman throughout the week. And Dee saw it all, kept it all buried inside, and was dying of guilt with each passing day. There was one particular time I came home from a trip unexpectedly, without warning. I'd finished a delivery earlier than anticipated and decided to head straight back instead of picking up another load. I arrived in the middle of the night, around 2 o'clock in the morning. The house was completely dark and silent. I opened the front door quietly, trying not to wake anyone. I walked to the bedroom, my feet heavy with exhaustion. Dominique was sleeping alone in our bed. I breathed a sigh of relief without even understanding why I felt relieved. I lay down beside her carefully. She woke up startled, almost jumping. "Marcus, you scared me half to death." "Sorry, baby. I got home early. Finished the run ahead of schedule." She acted strange, nervous, her voice higher than normal. "Is everything okay?" I asked, concerned. Yes. You just startled me, that's all." I kissed her forehead and fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the long drive. The next morning, Dee arrived for work, looking pale and shaken. She looked at me, then at Dominique, and said absolutely nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared breakfast. It was only much later that I understood the significance of that night. That night, I'd arrived just a little too early, just barely missing the truth. If I had arrived even an hour sooner, I might have caught them together. I might have discovered everything right then and there. But no, fate hadn't prepared that moment of revelation yet. There was more suffering ahead, more lies to be told, more years to be wasted. The years kept rolling by relentlessly. My business grew substantially. My family appeared to grow and thrive. And the betrayal grew deeper and more entrenched with each passing year. And Dee was there through it all, the silent witness to everything, until one day something changed inside her. She started attending a different church with a friend, just to be polite initially. She heard a preacher there talk about truth, about liberation, about how hiding another person's sin makes you complicit in that sin. Those words hammered repeatedly in her head, wouldn't let her rest. "I'm participating in the sin," she realized with horror. "I know the truth, and I'm not speaking up. I'm an accomplice to this destruction." She started attending that church regularly, gave her life fully to the Lord, and got baptized in that new congregation. A new spiritual life, a clean slate. And with that new life came an overwhelming conviction that wouldn't leave her alone. "I have to tell him," she decided firmly. "I can't take it anymore. Mr. Marcus deserves to know the truth, even if I lose everything because of it." And that conviction is what brought her to that fateful Monday morning, trembling in front of me, about to destroy the world I thought I had built so carefully. Returning to that Monday morning, when Dee finally found the courage to speak the truth, she stood before me in the kitchen, her eyes filled with tears that wouldn't stop flowing. After she said those devastating words, "When you're out on the road, your wife doesn't sleep alone." And I know exactly who the man is. I sat there in the kitchen chair, feeling the entire room spin around me violently. "Who is it, Dee?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who is the man?" She hung her head and wiped her tears with the corner of her apron, her hands shaking. "Mr. Marcus, you're not going to believe me. Nobody's going to believe me. That's why I stayed quiet for so long." "I'll believe you," I shouted without meaning to raise my voice so loud. "Tell me right now, for the love of God." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes tightly, and let it out slowly. "It's Pastor Mitchell." The silence that fell over that kitchen was the silence of death itself. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and physically ripped my heart out with their bare hands, leaving a gaping wound. "What?" I managed to wheeze out, unable to get enough air. "The pastor? Pastor Jerome Mitchell?" She nodded, still crying. "Yes, Mr. Marcus, Pastor Mitchell." "It can't be, Dee. You're mistaken. A preacher doesn't do things like that. Especially not Pastor Mitchell. He's a man of God. He baptized my children. He married us. I know, Mr. Marcus," she interrupted, her voice becoming firmer now. "I know it seems impossible. That's exactly why I never said anything. Who was going to believe the help, the housekeeper, saying the lady is carrying on with the preacher? They'd say I was crazy, that I was making up lies out of jealousy or spite. But I saw it, Mr. Marcus. I saw it many, many times. I've been seeing it for 20 years. My legs completely gave out. I slid right down to the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinet, unable to hold myself up. 20 years. 20 years of this betrayal. How did you find out?" I asked, needing the details, needing to understand how this had been happening right under my nose. "Tell me everything." And that's when she started telling me the complete story from the very beginning. She told me about those first months working in our home, when she started noticing Dominique getting dressed far too elaborately, just to supposedly go to church. She told me about the times my wife would come home in the middle of the night, sneaking in quietly, thinking no one was watching or listening. She told me about the car that would park in the garage, always the same black sedan, always on the nights when I was traveling out of state. She told me about the time she almost ran directly into the man as he was leaving before dawn, and how she recognized him immediately as Pastor Mitchell. "I didn't want to believe it at first," Dee said, wiping her face with both hands. "I thought maybe I saw wrong, that it was just someone who looked similar to him. But then I started paying closer attention. The car was the exact same one the pastor drove to church every Sunday. The voice I'd hear sometimes when they thought no one was awake, it was his voice, distinctive and recognizable. And then there was the day I knew with absolute certainty, beyond any shadow of doubt." "What day?" I asked, my voice raspy from holding back tears and rage. "It was that time you called from the road in the middle of the afternoon," Dee continued, her voice steady now. "You asked me to go find Mrs. Dominique at the church, because you needed to talk to her urgently about something. You said it was important business. I remembered that day vaguely. Some paperwork issue that needed her signature. It was late, almost 9 at night," Dee went on. "I walked down to the church, and it was completely dark except for the vestry. The light was on in there, visible through the window. I knocked on the door, but nobody answered. I pushed it open just a little bit. It wasn't locked." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "And that's when I saw them clearly. Mr. Marcus, I saw them both, Mrs. Dominique and Pastor Mitchell, in each other's arms, kissing passionately right there in the vestry, right there in the very place where he puts on his robes to preach the word of God. Every word was a knife stabbing into my heart. Every detail was pure torture. I just stood there frozen," Dee continued. "I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. They didn't see me, thank the Lord. I slipped away quietly, went back home, and didn't even look for her after that. I called you back and lied to you. I said she wasn't at the church and must have gone somewhere else. Why didn't you tell me then?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it from her lips. "Why didn't you tell me right then when it happened?" "Because I was scared, Mr. Marcus," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "Scared of losing my job and not being able to find another one. Scared of my own kids going hungry. and I was scared that nobody would believe me. It was my word against the lady and the preacher. I was going to lose every single time. So I swallowed it deep. I swallowed it and pretended I didn't see anything. But I saw everything, Mr. Marcus, and I never, ever forgot. I sat there on that cold kitchen floor, trying desperately to process it all. 20 years of lies. 20 years of being played for an absolute fool. Working like a dog, traveling endlessly, sweating and struggling, building a legacy and a life for what? To support a preacher's mistress? To raise children who might not even be mine? Oh, Lord, the children. Dee, I said slowly, terrified of the answer I might receive. My kids, Jamal and Keisha. Are they mine? She looked at me with a pity in her eyes that hurt worse than anything else she'd said. I don't know, Mr. Marcus. I honestly don't know for certain. But Jamal was born how long after the wedding? A few months, I replied, my throat tight. Just a few months after we got married. She stayed quiet, not needing to say another word. The implication was crystal clear. If the betrayal had been going on since before the wedding, which I would soon learn was exactly the case, then those kids could belong to either one of us. There was no way to know without proof. The pain I felt in that moment has no name in any language. It wasn't just jealousy or anger or disappointment. It was all of those emotions multiplied by 1,000, amplified beyond anything I'd ever experienced. It was the feeling that your entire life had been a lie, that everything you'd built, everything you'd loved, everything you'd believed in was completely fake. I had been deceived, manipulated, and used for the entire time. It takes a man to build a complete life. What do I do now, Dee? I asked, because suddenly I didn't know anything anymore. I couldn't think straight. My mind was chaos. You need proof, she said firmly, her voice strong now. Because if you accuse them without solid proof, they're going to deny it completely. Especially Pastor Mitchell. He's got a powerful reputation in this city. Everyone respects him, looks up to him. If you speak out without proof, they'll say you're crazy, that you're making it all up out of paranoia. You have to catch them together. You need evidence they can't deny. She was absolutely right. Word against word, I would lose every time. Especially against a man with decades of community standing and respect. I needed concrete, undeniable photographic proof. Help me, Dee, I pleaded, looking up at her from the floor. Help me find the truth. Help me catch those two. I'll help you, she said without any hesitation. I've kept this terrible secret for 20 years out of cowardice and fear. Now I'm going to help you find the truth for the sake of justice and what's right. Tell me what you need me to do. We spent the entire morning planning carefully. Dominique had gone to a church meeting and wouldn't be back until late afternoon. We had time to strategize. The plan was relatively simple. I was going to pretend I was leaving on a trip. I'd tell Dominique well in advance that it was a long haul, a week-long run down to Florida and back. I'd leave the house with my bags, my car, everything appearing completely normal. But I wouldn't actually leave town. I'd stay hidden at Dee's house, which was just a few blocks away from mine in the same neighborhood. And I'd wait there, watching, ready. When she leaves the house, or when he arrives at your house, I'll call you immediately, Dee said, working out the details. Then you come quickly and see everything with your own eyes. And bring your phone to take pictures. You absolutely need photographic proof that can't be disputed. Cell phones with cameras were common by then. They weren't professional quality, but they were good enough to capture evidence. I waited anxiously for Dominique to return home. She arrived around lunchtime, all smiles and smelling like expensive perfume. "Hey, baby," she greeted me cheerfully, kissing my cheek. "What a nice surprise to see you home. I thought you had a haul today." "No, "The trip is tomorrow," I lied smoothly, having practiced the words. "I signed a big contract for a Florida run. I'm going to be gone for 5 or 6 days, maybe a full week." I watched her eyes carefully. They lit up with what I now recognized wasn't joy for my success. It was joy for my upcoming absence, anticipation of freedom. "That's wonderful, baby," she said, her voice warm. But what she really meant was, "It's wonderful that you're going to be out of the way so I can do whatever I want." That night was one of the absolute worst of my entire life. Lying there beside her in our bed, knowing everything now, but having to pretend I knew nothing. She slept peacefully, even smiling slightly in her sleep. Completely content, I spent the entire night wide awake, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, planning, suffering, dying slowly inside. How many times had I slept in that bed after she'd been with him? How many times had I kissed that mouth that had kissed another man? How many times had I made love to a woman who didn't truly love me, who was only with me for convenience and financial security? The next morning, I played my part perfectly. I packed my bags, loaded them into the truck, and said goodbye to Dominique and the kids with what appeared to be my usual routine. "Daddy, come back soon," Keisha asked, hugging me tight. "I will, sweetheart," I promised, my heart breaking. "Take care of your mama for me." If I had known then that she wasn't my biological daughter, but I didn't know yet, I still held on to foolish hope that maybe the kids were mine, that maybe the betrayal had started later in the marriage. I drove off, went around several blocks, parked far away where no one would recognize my vehicle, and walked back to Dee's small house. She let me in quickly and hid me in her back room. "Now we wait," she said quietly. "It might take time. She won't do anything immediately. She's going to wait until she's absolutely certain you're far gone." I waited for what felt like an eternity. All afternoon, into the evening. Around 10 o'clock at night, Dee's phone rang. It was her daughter, who had agreed to watch my house from across the street. "Mama, Mrs. Dominique just left in her car. She's headed toward the church." Dee hung up and looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. "This is it, Mr. Marcus. She's gone to meet him. Get ready." I stood up, my entire body trembling. I grabbed my phone and checked that the camera was working properly. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold it steady. I was about to witness with my own eyes the betrayal that had been destroying me for decades without my knowledge. I drove slowly toward the church, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. The church itself was completely dark. The service had ended hours ago. But then I saw it, parked on the street behind the church where the parsonage stood. Her silver sedan, the car I'd bought for her, trying to hide but impossible to miss. I parked 2 blocks away in a dark spot where no one would see me. I turned off the engine and sat there, watching the parsonage. It was an old 2-story building. The upstairs windows had a soft yellow light, glowing a bedroom light. I felt bile rise in my throat. My wife was in there with him right now. I couldn't just sit there. I got out of the car and walked slowly down the street, staying in the shadows. I reached the parsonage. The back gate was slightly open. I pushed it carefully, making no sound, and stepped into the yard. There was a window on the first floor, with the curtain not quite closed all the way. I leaned in and looked through the gap, and there they were dot in the living room furniture, a crucifix on the wall, religious books everywhere, and on the sofa sat Dominique and Pastor Mitchell, intimately close. She was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder. He was stroking her hair affectionately, the way a husband touches a wife. I lifted my phone with a trembling hand and took a photo. The flash went off and I froze, terrified they'd seen me. But they didn't. They were too wrapped up in each other. I took more photos, 3, 4, 5, capturing everything before the risk became too great. They stood up from the sofa. Pastor Mitchell took Dominique's hand and led her upstairs toward the bedroom. I watched them go, heard her soft laughter, saw him whisper something in her ear. They disappeared up the stairs. The living room light went out. Only the bedroom light remained glowing. I sat on a garden bench in the dark yard because my legs couldn't support me anymore. I cried there, alone in the darkness, harder than I'd cried since my father died. I cried from pain, from anger, from the crushing humiliation. I cried for the wasted years, the destroyed trust, the love I'd given that was never returned. I stayed there for hours, unable to leave. I needed to see this through to the very end. Around 3 in the morning, the bedroom light finally went out. Minutes later, the back door opened. Pastor Mitchell came out first, wearing just pants and a shirt, his hair disheveled. Dominique followed, fixing her clothes, smoothing her hair. They stopped at the door. He pulled her into a long embrace, then lifted her face and kissed her deeply, a kiss that said everything about their relationship. I lifted my phone again. I took photos of the embrace, the kiss, the two of them together at that door. Proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. Dominique got in her car. Pastor Mitchell stood at the door waving as she backed out. Then he went inside and closed the door. I went home and waited. When she arrived, trying to sneak in quietly, she found me sitting on our bed in the dark. "Elias, you scared me. What are you doing here? I thought you were on your trip." "I got back early," I said calmly. "Where were you?" "I was right here, sleeping." I grabbed my phone. "Sit down. I need to show you something." I showed her the first photo of her and the pastor embracing on the sofa. Her face turned white as a sheet, then the photos of them going upstairs. The photos at the door. The kiss. "Elias, listen, I can explain." "Explain what?" I exploded. "Explain that you're sleeping with a preacher? Explain that you've been cheating on me for 20 years? Explain that while I'm working myself to death, you're in his bed?" She started crying. "I'm sorry, Elias. Please. Since when?" I demanded. "Since when did this start?" She stayed quiet. "Answer me." "Since before I married you," she whispered. The world stopped spinning. "Before the marriage? You were already with him when you married me?" She nodded, crying. "I loved him first, but he became a pastor. My family forced me to marry someone respectable. I married you, but I never stopped seeing him. 40 years of being second choice. 40 years of being the fool who paid the bills while supporting the pastor's mistress." "The kids," I said, my voice trembling. "Jamal and Keisha. Are they mine?" "Yes, they're yours." "Of course they are. Are you absolutely certain? Because if you were with him before we married, they could be his." "No, Elias, they're yours." "I'm sure." But her voice had no certainty. There was doubt, and doubt was already too much. "We're doing DNA tests," I decided. "All of us. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to know the truth." The next day, we went to the lab. The kids didn't understand. "Dad, why are we doing this?" Jamal asked. "I'll explain later, son." A week later, the results came. I went alone to pick them up. The doctor handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it and read, "Jamal, probability of paternity, 0%. Keisha, probability of paternity, 0%. Neither child was mine. Both shared the same biological father, Pastor Mitchell, 40 years. I had raised 2 children for 40 years. Paid for everything. Loved them with all my heart. And they weren't mine. I went straight to the church. It was Sunday morning, the main service. The church was packed, maybe 500 people. Pastor Mitchell was at the pulpit in his robes, preaching about fidelity and honoring marriage vows. I walked down the center aisle. He stopped talking when he saw me. I climbed the altar steps, took the microphone from his hand, and turned to the congregation. "This man is a liar," I announced. "He's been sleeping with my wife for 40 years. Gasps filled the church. I connected my phone to the church projector and displayed the photos on the wall. The embraces, the kiss. The evidence was undeniable. And more, I continued. My kids, Curtis and Keisha, I raised them my whole life. Today I found out they're not mine. They're his. They're Pastor Mitchell's children." Chaos erupted. People screaming, crying, trying to attack him. The pastor collapsed, finally confessing. It was weakness. I loved her. The church removed him immediately. 35 years of ministry ended in one day. I filed for divorce. Dominique got nothing. I kept everything. Telling the kids was the hardest part. I showed them the DNA results. They were devastated. "You're still our dad," Keisha sobbed. "DNA doesn't change that." "Yes," I replied firmly. "I raised you. I am your father. I always will be." They cut Dominique and Pastor Mitchell out of their lives completely. Dominique ended up alone, cleaning houses to survive. Pastor Mitchell moved away, sick and forgotten. When she found him and said they could finally be together, he rejected her. "You destroyed my life. Get out." 2 years after the divorce, I married Dee, the woman who had the courage to tell me the truth, the woman who'd been honest when everyone else lied. Today, I'm 67 and she's 58. We live in peace, building a life based on truth. I lost 40 years to a lie, but I gained something priceless: dignity, real love, and the knowledge that the simplest person can have the greatest character. Pretty face and a church pew don't make character. A preacher can be a sinner, and a housekeeper can be an angel. The truth hurts, but it sets you free. And I'd rather live in the pain of truth than the comfort of a lie. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe to the OG Chronicles channel. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed your life? I'm grateful you listened to my story. 2 more powerful stories will appear on your screen. Choose what to watch next.